Hey, you guys. Okay, so today I'm going to share some trauma with you real quick. So, without further ado, let's do this. Okay? Okay. So, today is a wild topic. Okay? So, we all think dolphins are like these cute little intelligent creatures, right? Well, most of us. I am not one of those. I am horrified of dolphins. And this story makes me most definitely question dolphins and humans as a whole. And you'll see why once I tell you, okay? So, welcome to the show. If you haven't listened before, I am Britt. I'm your host, and this is Truific Podcast. And this is basically where I sit here and ramble on about the unbelievable, crazy things that have gone on in the world around us that we just don't even fathom to think about. And even when you hear some of this stuff, it's still so hard to take it seriously as something that is fact. So, some people love dolphins, and then some people go a little bit overboard with it. So, we're going to talk about the time that NASA made a woman essentially be in a whole ass relationship with the dolphin. So, the 1960s was an incredibly curious time when it came to research. We were still studying the human brain and the brains of animals, and basically how we work together, how we're alike, how we're different. And we're still doing that, but we went really, really weird back in the day, apparently. So, scientists couldn't believe the size of a dolphin's brain. At all. They wanted to know more between whether a dolphin could understand and develop communication skills with humans. So they found the perfect woman. Way too perfect, if you ask me, for this case. So, Margaret Lovett was obsessed with dolphins and animals as a whole, basically from the time that she was born. She watched movies where animals could talk, and she absolutely loved it. Like Dr. Dolittle was her shit. And she was like, hey, I'm gonna make that a reality. I'm gonna see how far we can get. So, she became basically a professional at analyzing animal behaviors and their emotions and ways of communication, but just as an enjoyment. She didn't go to school for it or anything. And this is what led to the beginning of her adventure on research. So, in her early 20s, she moved to the Caribbean to enjoy the ocean life. And during Christmas one year, her brother-in-law came in and he was like, hey, I heard there's some secret labs at the other side of the island that they're doing research working with dolphins and stuff. And so she got intrigued and she went down to the far end of the island to see for herself. And upon arrival, she met the man in charge of the project partially, and his name was Gregory Bateson. He was intrigued right off the bat from her because not many people just came out of nowhere and was like, hey, I'm here and I'm wondering what's going on and what I can do to help. And so he was a great intellectual and was impressed by her drive and her interest. And so she offered her help to work with the animals and help the lab however they needed. And he wanted help conducting the research, so he asked her to watch and analyze the dolphins for a bit. Now, even though she had no scientific background at all, he was thrown through a loop at how well Margaret could read and connect to the animals. Now, Bateman offered her to come back whenever she was pleased to, and she was basically welcome from there on out. Now, being as the gig was her dream for years to learn how to connect and talk with the mammals of the ocean, she went on board with the lab. And after a little bit of time, an exciting thing happened. Okay? So Margaret was on her way to see how the head and mind behind the place was doing. And his name was John Lilly. He's the whole dude that's behind literally everything behind this project. So John Lilly was the brain behind the work, and she walked in, and it was just life-changing to her. The brain behind the work, John Lilly, was sitting there talking to a dolphin, and he would go, woo woo woo, and the dolphin would go, oh, woo woo woo, and then they would do it again. And then his assistant would follow in a higher pitch, and then the dolphin would imitate her tone. Now, it was startling to everybody involved, but they were just so excited. So they brought their findings and all of this to a book that they wrote, and they called it The Man and Dolphin. And it was written to show the findings of connection between mammal and human. Now, initial observations of dolphins mimicking human voices and teaching them to speak English, and ultimately, this sounds crazy, but this was the goal, guys, okay? They were going to teach these sea animals how to speak English, and they were going to ultimately make a cetacean chair at the United Nations where all marine mammals would have an enlightening input into world affairs, widening our perspectives on everything from science to history, economics, and current affairs. They wanted animals' inputs on this. That's why they were doing this. So the book then caught the attention of a man who literally had just gotten a break in the astronomy department. And his name was Frank Drake. And he had recently completed his first experiment to basically, he detected signals from extraterrestrial civilizations to try and communicate outside the norm, which is kind of the same thing that they were doing with dolphins, but here. And so, after his interest in the experiment, NASA came in and actually gave funding for the project and backed it completely. So, with the funding, they opened a whole new lab in the Caribbean dedicated specifically to nurturing closer relationships between dolphins and humans. Lilly started, and Lilly is the man that is in charge of this. Keep that in mind, because reading this, I don't know why Lilly just reminds me of like a chick name, and it kept confusing me. So yes, Lilly is the man in charge of this whole project and all the dolphins, all the dolphin locations, the places that they were kept, all that. So Lilly started Lovett on the job immediately, and in 1964, Lovett arrived and began her job of trying to teach the dolphins English. Now, meanwhile, the director, Gregory Bateman, would focus more so on animal-to-animal communication, like what they were saying to each other, how they made, efforts to communicate with one another, and how we can kind of do the same thing. And so he was focusing on that, and Lovett had an idea that might help the bond between the dolphins and himself, is what she said. He wanted to stay with these dolphins. Okay? She wanted to stay with these dolphins 24/7. Like, she was like, hey, I want to be here during the night because, we want to know how these dolphins' brains work. Well, they have activity going on at night, and we're missing out on that. That could be a huge part of our research that we are missing out on because we're all going home. So I want to stay here during the night. And so she came up with a wild idea, and she was like, listen, let's plaster the entire place, fill it with water. I can spend all my time here with the dolphin and see if I can act like a mom to it. Teach it communication, love. And weirdly enough, Lilly was on board. So they waterproofed the building so that she could live with a dolphin and live comfortably with them at least for 3 months. and she was to choose between 3 dolphins taking part in this experiment. So she chose the youngest one due to the fact that he hadn't been around much English communication as much as the other two, and he also was younger. So him picking up on communication might be a little bit easier, and teaching it communication might be easier than those that already kind of have an idea of communication. So she chose the youngest one, and the thing about picking this dolphin is this wasn't just like a little young girl. This was a little boy. Okay, this is like the equivalent of adopting a freaking fresh 13-year-old boy going through puberty. Okay, they're trying to figure their shit out. Okay, so she had to deal with him trying to figure his shit out, if you catch my drift. And it was kind of taking a toll on the research, according to her. So, because what they were doing was they had the 2 female other dolphins that were older in another tank, and he would get distracted and stuff with his brain and urges and things like that. So they would let him leave Lavette, and he would leave her for a little bit and then come back once his urges were taken care of, and they would get back to research. So it gets weird. Okay, it gets real weird. So Lavette planned to spend 6 days a week with this dolphin, and she stayed on a platform placed in the middle of the water and did her paperwork on a desk that was basically like suspended from the ceiling. And so she was doing this, and Lavette's first week went by with Peter the dolphin. That was his name. They bonded well, but Lavette thought that they could succeed more with the experiment of teaching him English with a more human connection. So, as I just told you, they were having to let him go relieve his urges, right? With other dolphins. Well, Lavette got a little not on board with that, so she just started relieving the dolphin herself after coming to the conclusion that the brief time that he was gone to the other dolphins and away from her was time that their bond was broken. Then oh man, Peter's not gonna like this episode at all. Okay, so then they got government clearance to basically start seeing if they could get the dolphins to trip balls. I'm not even joking. Not even joking, guys. They gave LSD to these dolphins to see what would happen. Now, they did this to see if they would react the same way that humans do, but it didn't do it. Thank God. So no animals were, well, I can't say no animals because you just don't do that with an animal without it harming them. And the story is why. Because it's really, really, really fucked up physically and mentally. So, let's keep going. So, she started relieving the dolphin in herself, then they got government clearance to start seeing if they could get the dolphins to trip balls. They weren't tripping balls, so they were like, okay, I didn't do anything. And after this, John Lilly was like going full force, balls to the wall with his research with the dolphins. And with more and more time on research, the more he seemed to not really give a shit about them. Like, he was kind of like, oh, yay, you did a trick. Let me write about it. Cool. Carry on. With more and more time, this caused the experiment to stop. And the dolphin house, as they called it, was completely defunded. As it should have been. Now, without the funding and location, they were forced to shut down, and Lavette had to help set up for the dolphins to be moved to a much smaller place. And this much smaller place was a place in Miami. It was a bank that Lily owned that he turned into a reserve for dolphins, but it had like way smaller tanks, no sunlight, nothing. And sadly, Levat couldn't keep Peter, and this move, along with being separated from Margaret, is... Oh, this is insane. Okay. The move was too much for this dolphin. The move, all this change, everything, being touched by human like that, being forced to cohabitate with a human like that, and then having it all ripped from him was awful. So Peter the dolphin chose to unalive himself. And I mean that quite literally. Like, this dolphin was like, I'm done. So dolphins are not automatic air breathers like we are. Every breath is basically a conscious effort. If life becomes too unbearable, the dolphins just kind of take a breath and then they sink to the bottom and they're like, I'm not gonna do it again. I'm not gonna take another breath. So Levat moved on to keep doing her research of communicating with dolphins, but with different methods this time around. And I hope she continued that, because the fact that she was... It made her sound a little bit like a jealous girlfriend, not gonna lie. Like, you can't go sleep with those other girlfriends, you're spending too much time away from me. What? So, up her, though, nobody else has tried to teach dolphins English again. Which, can you blame them? This is what happened when they tried to figure out how to teach a dolphin English. How does teach it? What is... No. Okay. Guys, quick question. Just real quick question. Do you believe that you need to basically diddle a dolphin to get to know them? Because I feel like that could have been, like, what they had going was completely fine. It was completely fine. And then she just was like, nah, that's my job. So, yeah, we stopped trying to teach English to dolphins after this experience, and as a whole, and decided to focus on their language, as we should have from the get-go. So, that is, about the woman who basically dated a dolphin and brought him down with an extreme depression and caused him to unalive himself. There you go. This, been real. Been fun. But it hasn't been real fun. Alright, you guys have a good night. Let me know what you guys think of this, because it's brain melting when I saw this. Oh my god. No. You couldn't pay me enough to have sex with a dolphin, much less, like, me choose to do that voluntarily. And then not only that, but she basically did, like, the equivalent of a hit and quit, I feel like. Like, she hit it, and then she was like, oh, I can't afford you anymore. Deuces. And then he unalived himself, and she's still out there, like... I cared at the moment, but I don't now. I've moved on. I moved on quite quickly. So, yeah.